All right, group 4 again, Sam and Jessica back at it. We have the exciting chapter 13 on school finance. So here we go. The United States Constitution imposes no legal obligation on the federal government to operate a public education system. State legislatures are generally authorized to provide for a public education system because according to the 10th Amendment, all powers not given to the federal government are reserved for the states or the people. And like it says, education is not a right of the federal government.
They may also levy taxes and develop a systematic method of distributing school funds. School districts are agents of the state, but do not possess broad powers to levy taxes and are subject only to the powers delegated to them by the legislature. So the school district itself cannot levy taxes. That would have to go to, like, for example, a vote in your school district. So not by the school district, but by the government.
And it's kind of interesting that you said that. The school district that I work in, we just had a bond proposal for a new middle school. So we
Mm-hmm.
vote on it, and it didn't pass because a lot of people didn't want their taxes to go up. So
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to get those passed sometimes. There's some local districts by us that have been trying for years to get that passed and haven't been able to make it happen.
I think they're trying again next year, but we'll see
Yeah.
how it goes. The legislature does not have discretionary power to delegate taxing authority to local school districts if it chooses to do so, as long as state constitutional tax limitations are met. Excuse me. Taxing authority cannot be delegated to subordinate bodies unless there are clear limitations or restrictions placed on the delegated powers.
Taxation for public schools. State and local tax account for over 90% of educational expenditures. Sales taxes and income taxes are primary sources of state funding, whereas property tax represents the most abundant source at the local level.
Property taxes are generally characterized as real property or personal property and contribute the major source of funding for public schools. The three basic types of taxes are progressive tax, regressive tax, and proportional tax. With progressive tax, the rate of tax increases as the base increases. So the more it's worth, the more tax you'll pay on it.
Consequently, a larger percentage of income is taken as taxpayer income increases, as Sam had said. Personal income and property tax are examples of progressive tax. So, for example, the more your property or house is worth, the more tax you're going to pay.
Kind of got a little ahead of myself there. So in regressive taxes, tax rates decrease when the tax base increases, with higher income residents paying a smaller percentage than lower income residents. Gasoline and cigarette taxes are examples of regressive taxes.
In proportional or flat tax, the rate remains the same irrespective of income or wealth. Sales tax and estate wealth are examples of proportional tax. And as of note, Hawaii is actually the only state with a single statewide school district.
Yeah, Hawaii's kind of mentioned a lot in this chapter.
Yeah, several times.
Yeah. Consequently, no property is levied for education and no prescribed formula is used to fund public schools. Kind of varies as different places. State support for public schools is derived from the general fund.
Tax rate. When a local district formulates its budget based on anticipated needs of the district, it may be necessary to levy taxes to generate needed funds. Those tax rates are generally based on estimated revenue needed by the district to meet its financial needs.
Estimated revenue projections must be realistic, made in good faith, and based on defensible grounds. Local school districts may not use their taxing authority with the express purpose of creating a surplus fund. So you can't just raise the taxes just to have more money.
It is not unusual for taxpayers to challenge the validity of a tax levy for school based on a claim that the tax levy is excessive and extends beyond the needs of the district. So kind of back to that, it's taxpayers often believe that the district is trying to bring in more money than they actually need to function and are trying to create a surplus as opposed to just creating more money that they need to function.
Mhm. All right. Legal challenges to school funding. School finance programs have been challenged under both federal and state constitutions. Like we said, the textbook mentions a lot of different court cases about mostly state challenges to funding programs. Most challenges have focused on issues regarding equity of finance programs with respect to tax burdens.
Other challenges involve assertions that parents and their children are denied the benefits of an equal educational opportunity based on disparities in tax revenue and distribution of revenue among school districts within a state.
So that leads us to the San Antonio Independent School District versus Rodriguez case. Legal challenges were pursued at both the state and federal level, challenging funding programs throughout the county using the fiscal neutrality standard embraced in the Serrano case, Serrano v. Priest, I think, to
Yes,
address disparity in wealth among school districts. And if I remember right, the Serrano case basically says the quality of a child's education should not be determined based on like how much wealth their school district has or how, how much the properties are worth around the school. Be unconstitutional.
right. One such case in Texas reached the U.S. Supreme Court, and in a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court reversed a lower court's ruling that the Texas finance system was unconstitutional. And I believe that it was that case that kind of set the precedence that these cases would stay at the state level and not be heard in federal court.
Mm-hmm. I get from what I got, it's because the financing of the schools is not unconstitutional through property tax because
Right.
education is not in the Constitution. So
Right. While important, it's not a constitutional um, right.
yeah, exactly. The court did not. The court did note the discrepancies created by the funding system, where great disparities existed regarding ad valorem taxes from one district to another. I had to look that up. Ad valorem means according to the value in Latin. It just means proportional to the value of the asset. So how much it's worth, basically.
In spite of these discrepancies, the court concluded that the Texas funding system did not work to the disadvantage of any specific class or group, since the disadvantages occurred only between districts, regardless of the relative wealth of any family within the district.
The Rodriguez ruling essentially removed future finance cases from reaching the highest court in the land, like what Jessica just mentioned. The U.S. Supreme Court's decision effectively placed legal challenges regarding school funding programs in the state courts, since education is a function of the states.
The compelling aspect of the Rodriguez ruling was that Texas case did not interfere with a fundamental right, since education, while undeniably of high importance, is not recognized by the High Court as being among those guaranteed by the Constitution, like we had said earlier.
I kind of get a little ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
And the book also says litigation has happened in basically every state except for Hawaii, because Hawaii, it's just one school district, so they don't really need to worry about it.
Yeah, they're all state funded and no local funding.
Exactly. Equity funding in education. Equity may be defined differently among state lawmakers. However, it typically means that per pupil expenditures are equally distributed through a local school district. So there's not one school in the district that spends more on a student than a different school. It's equitable.
Since property tax is most frequently used to support local education, there are disparities throughout a state based on the level of local revenue generated by property tax. Most states, though, attempt to generate funding formulas that subsidize local effort to compensate for disparities among wealthy and less wealthy districts.
Typically, the equity formula includes state aid minus local effort as a means of creating parity in funding schools throughout the state. Some states refer to such formulas as power equalization formulas or district equalization formulas.
The theory behind this approach is grounded in the need to provide equal educational opportunities for all students, irrespective of socioeconomic status. Equal educational opportunity occurs when all school districts within a state have equal access to resources that are necessary to provide an education up to a prescribed level.
Equity formulas, by definition, are input-based and have been the target of legal challenges over several decades based on funding disparities. Kind of like we were saying, lots of litigation about
Yeah.
funding in public schools. Excuse me.
Equity and adequacy of funding for public schools. In recent years, many states have commissioned studies to determine the adequacy of their public education system. The focus on adequacy is a departure from their traditional focus on equity.
Equity denotes fairness, which suggests that all communities, rich or poor, are taxed at similar rates and have equal access to similar amounts of revenue per student, and which does not occur in most states.
Adequacy, on the other hand, focuses on a minimal level of funding needed for every school to teach its students, thus subscribing to an education that is adequate rather than excellent.
I thought that line was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Focus shifts from having a great, excellent education to just
Good enough.
Yeah, good enough. That's a great way of putting it.
Yeah.
And then public schools across the United States are facing increased pressure to improve the overall quality of education provided for students and have commissioned adequacy studies. And then the book goes on to list a bunch of different adequacy studies in a lot of different states. So that's really all I got on the chapter. A lot of
Yep.
tax stuff. So if you don't have anything further, then I think we're
Nope.
good.
Nope, I don't.
All right, and that's all
All
for
right.
us.
See ya.